What do you fear this demonic community organizer will do next in his jihad against the middle class? And Lanny on WBOB has an answer.
Reparations. That's the one card he has not played that he's holding in his hand is reparations.
I understand, but what is the legal mechanism for this community organizer to steal more money from the hardworking middle class to pay reparations to blacks who were never enslaved? Tell me how he's going to do that. What's he going to do? Make it an executive order that every white person's going to pay $100,000 to who?
Excuse me. The legal mechanism is what he's doing today. Exactly. Ignoring the law. Ignoring every bit of the law, the Constitution.
Well, I've covered this issue of reparations many, many times, and of course, no one today has ever suffered slavery, ever. And nobody listening to this show has ever kept a slave, so the whole point is absurd. And if the African-American community wants reparations, boy, we have a lot of answers to that question. How about the billions and billions of dollars that have been paid already in other forms? Where'd that money go? And moreover, who should receive reparations? Oprah Winfrey? Should rich African Americans get reparations or only poor? And what number do you cut it off at? And by the way, should Africans who've just arrived in America over the last 5 years who've never suffered slavery also receive money just based on their race? Or is it limited only to African Americans whose families go back to the slave days? It's a very complicated question. And by the way, who pays the reparations? All Americans, including me, whose grandfather was an immigrant, who came here when he was 13 years old, and I'm the grandson of son of an immigrant, by the way. I owe reparations for what reason? Well, because my grandfather worked hard enough to die of a heart attack at 49 and never kept a slave. I wouldn't pay 10 cents. I'd go to jail before I paid a dime to these gangster criminals. I won't pay a penny. Put me in jail before I pay a nickel in reparations. Not 1 cent comes out of my pocket to this gang. I'll be back or I'm going to say something I really regret.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
My Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com, the only company I trust to protect my wealth with gold and silver. Call 800-BUYCOIN. You want to talk about reparations? We can do it. Many people are asking, what is this community organizer going to do to the middle class next? He's checked off his punch list, including the biggest ticket item, which is deal with Iran to give him the right to develop a nuclear weapon and get nothing in return. Because he got nothing in return, nothing, going to zero. Nada, nothing. He was put in office for a number of reasons. This was the big one. That's the big kahuna. Give Iran the nuclear weapon. Change the entire world balance. Throw Israel under the bus. Show Netanyahu he's a bigger man than him. Show a real war hero like Netanyahu that this community organizer is a bigger macher than Netanyahu. Typical left-wing punk, always wanting to show that they're better than better men than them. There's an ego here that's beyond comprehension. You could see it in his demeanor, his arrogance, his disconnection from reality. But I'm not a psychologist. I'm a talk show host. So what's next on the agenda? What's on the punch list? Well, a man just called and said reparations. And I am saying to you that there's no mechanism for reparations that have already not been paid. Welfare, you name it. Reparations have already been paid to the nth degree. And what did it get us? Take a look at Baltimore. You'll see what it got us. That's all. So who will pay the reparations? Those descendants of people who kept slaves? Well, that would be logical. They benefited. Who are they? And who would receive the reparations? Those whose ancestors were slaves, including billionaires like Oprah Winfrey, for example. They also are entitled to reparations. And would it be based only on race? Would Africans who've just come here in the last few years who've never suffered from slavery also be entitled to reparations? Of course not. They never suffered from the trauma of slavery. So you can't give them reparations. And who in America should be billed for these reparations? Well, I don't know. Maybe if you really looked at it, you would go to Africa and you would find the descendants of African families whose ancestors dealt in slavery, the black Africans now. Or you'd go to Saudi Arabia and you'd go to the Arabian families whose ancestors dealt as slave masters, slave traders rather, in Africa. And you could say they owe us reparations. See how far you get in Saudi Arabia. Or you can go to Portugal and Spain And you can go to the families, the descendants of families that dealt in the slave trade, and you could approach them, see how far you'd get in Portugal or Spain. No, you see, you can't get anywhere in Saudi Arabia, Portugal, or Spain, or in Africa for that matter, but you can go after the white middle class because the white middle class is weak. You can do anything you want to them. Look how far you've gotten already with your screaming race in a crowded nation, huh? Keep it up. Just keep it up. Keep pushing. See how far you get by pushing and pushing and pushing. And see how many other twisted maniacs come out of the closet. The weak ones whose minds snap. You keep pushing and you're going to wind up with the whirlwind. That's what you're going to get. So I don't think that he's going to push reparations just before Hillary goes for office, by the way. And I think she's been anointed in advance, if you can believe it. By what I see going on, unless Trump is for real, which I hope he is, and he runs and he could win. He'd win, by the way. If he runs, he wins. He'd win. By the way, even the poor would vote for Trump. You don't know that. Even Hispanics who come here to work would vote for him. Because the one thing everyone respects is hard work and money. And he has that. And he built it on his own. And so, as I said to you, even immigrants respect people with power and money. They'd rather have somebody with money running the country than some socialist who's going to take away what they've earned through taxation. WABC, Tom, you're calling on the reparations issue. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi. So also, you have to consider the genetic aspect. I mean, many of the African Americans today are of mixed race. And so, and much of...
Wait, okay, of mixed race, so what? They should only get a minimal number of reparations, or?
No, well, there's further problem. Some of the Africans are also have genetics from the people who enslaved them. So who do they pay? Themselves? I mean, it's a ridiculous concept as far as reparations.
Correct. In other words, if you want to demand reparations, go to Africa and go with the African families who benefited from the slave trade because the descendants still live there.
Well, that's a possibility, but however, the Americans are of mixed genetics, and so they're not entitled to anything. My relatives, my genetics, never enslaved anyone. So why should I have?
Yeah, but I've heard the radicals argue that it doesn't matter simply because you're white, you owe us something because you benefited from slavery. I've heard them throw that in my face, which is so ludicrous it's not even worth discussing.
Well, but it's complete nonsense because...
Yeah, but that's what the radical left keeps pushing. I'm surprised that Hillary Clinton hasn't come out for reparations yet.
Yeah.
That'd be a winning campaign issue.
Instead already.
All right, my friend. Yeah, this will come up because there are no black slaves living today. Slavery ended more than 160 years ago. And let me remind you, at the cost of several 100,000 lives lost in the Civil War, mainly white men who died to free the slaves, if you want to put it that way. And why would you ask American taxpayers, many of them from families that came to the U.S. after slavery ended, to pay you a dime for the wrongs of slavery? It's crazy. Moreover, many blacks have succeeded quite well in American society without reparations. How do you figure that? You look at your president. Look how well he did. He didn't need reparations, did he? Look how far he got with affirmative action and white guilt. So who do you charge for this and who gets the money? Moreover, federal and state governments have already spent billions of dollars on social programs such as welfare, subsidized housing, that's called public housing, health care, employment development, affirmative action, education programs aimed at African Americans. And so why would you continue to push this idea that A, someone is owed something, and B, someone owes it? This would lead to huge unfairness, huge administrative costs. Let me ask you, who would receive reparations? All blacks or just descendants of slaves? Would wealthy African Americans receive payments like Oprah Winfrey? Would Bill Cosby receive payments? Would athletes receive payments? And if a fund was set up, who would manage it? Who would manage this fund? Another government agency? How much would that cost? And what about those who were denied payments or not paid enough, call for even more reparations and file lawsuits? See, there are a few problems here if you actually use your mind. So you have to think very, very carefully before you rush to judgment.
Going with the reparations, when, part Yugoslavian, and the word slave comes from Yugoslavia. Slave, obviously Slav translated slave. So I'm a descendant of slaves. And when I talk to black people today, they're amazed that I'm a descendant of slaves because they think it only happens to black people.
In other words, the reference to Slavic people refers to slavish people who were slaves. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So the Romans...
You're right. Don't try to educate people who don't know what the word education means. Don't tell them the Irish are treated lower than dogs when they came to America. Don't tell them about all the immigrant experiences of people who came here without a dime in their pocket, who busted their behinds to make a life for themselves so their children would have a better life. Don't tell them about that. Instead, feed them the rubbish that someone owes them something, so they'll burn the city down again. Go ahead. Keep feeding them that rat trap garbage, that snake oil crap that somebody owes them something.
Dr. Savage, I have never been one for appeasement, reparations, or racist and whatever. And if I never ever get accused of it again, they can have my money. It's worth it.
Do you actually think that if you appeased the civil rights gangsters who are pushing reparations, do you actually think they would stop with that one payment? Do you think they would stop pushing the big lie about white privilege? Do you think they would stop humiliating the white children in America in our schools? Do you actually think so?
I do not. I don't think so. That's part of
I wouldn't give them 10 cents. I would fight to my death before I pay one dime in reparations, and I would go to jail before I would pay 1 cent in reparations. That would be the last straw for me. If they ever try to pull that one off, I would lead a reparations rebellion in this country. No matter what my age would be, if I had the strength from God, I would lead a reparations rebellion against the government, and it would be an armed rebellion. I would lead an armed rebellion against the government if they try to push that one down my throat after ripping off my life with affirmative action and welfare. I'm sick of it. And this gangster keeps getting away with it. This criminal in the White House, day in and day out, one lie after another. Imperious, arrogant, hostile, aimed only at the white middle class. Look at his policies and tell me who he's going after. Open your eyes, you idiots.